PowerPoint.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's noon. Let's call the meeting to order. We're in quorum. I don't have the agenda right in front of me. How do we start? Clinton, are you starting?
Yes, sir. Mayor, council, city staff, I don't know if we have any citizens here, but if so, welcome to our latest budget discussion. We are within 2 weeks of adopting the final budget. Proposed adoption date September 19th. So a lot of work has gone into this right up front. I would like to thank Krista and David for all their hard work, all of city staff. It's really taken a team, the citizens who have commented throughout this process. And then finally, city council. I think it's very important to get input from the council. We provide a lot of detail to you for very specific reasons. This is something Randy and I just talked about. When you run into folks at the grocery store and they're asking you questions about why their taxes may have gone up or something like that, I don't want you to have one or two big reasons why. I want you to have about 100 reasons why you can speak to that. So it's very important to us that y'all understand our operations through and through. I think you'll be very happy with what we have to present to you today. Over the last several months, we have listened to your comments. We have incorporated those into the budget. We have made a number of additional budget changes. And again, thank you, staff, for bringing cost-saving measures to us so that we can further reduce the budget this year. This budget is based on the voter approval rate that was discussed a couple of weeks ago by the council. We'll get into that and exactly what that means for this particular budget, and then also looking forward to 2025 and 26. I want to reflect back to last year and talk just a little bit about deficit budgeting, since that's something that has been the focus of several people in the public, and there've been some questions by council members. Last year was a little bit of an odd year. We were going into the year with a very healthy fund balance. In other words, revenues being greater than expenses, really building these reserves up, especially in our general fund, giving us a little bit of room to address some of the issues that had really needed to be addressed for some time. And I see a lot of police officers, fire EMS personnel on the room. That's really where we started last year, addressing the step plan leveling issue. It's about a $500,000 cost. It needed to be done. You know, it has paid dividends already in hiring and preserving staff in both of those departments. We had a higher than normal increase in our employee salaries. It was 9% last year, again, following that CPI inflation, which was about 9%. Most cities did that, but we had those dollars again saved away where we were able to address that. We were able to bring a number of additional employees into the budget. Regarding our employee expenses, we're about 30% with all of our employee expenses. 30% of our budget is all of our employee expenses, which is really about where you want to be. Any higher than that, and you're a little bit top heavy, if you don't have the growth without increasing the tax rate substantially, you get into a situation where you can't replace the equipment on a regular basis like we do currently. You can't keep up with projects. You might extend your street paving project out to 15 years versus 10 years. You might eliminate a lot of the much needed parks projects that a lot of our visitors and locals enjoy every single day. So you get into a position and you really don't feel that until about a decade or so down the road. So we're very careful adding staff, try to really maintain just right in that 30% range. Kerrville's 31%, Bernie's just right in that range. So again, we've made some adjustments trying to get to a point where we don't have as much of a deficit budget. By deficit budget, what I'm saying is, and Chris will go into a lot more detail. Our revenues don't cover our expenses, but every budget that we've adopted, our revenue plus what cash we have in the bank covers those expenses. So I don't have discretion at the end or through the year to do projects or not do projects just based on a straight deficit budget, not having the cash. We always have adopted a budget, having or borrowing from that savings account, if you will. We're trying to get closer to adopting the budget where we don't have to do that. We borrowed a lot from that general fund savings account last year. We had really built that up. We're keeping a little bit of a cushion there this year, but we're trying to keep it a lot closer. And this is something Randy and I agree on. This is something that we have been talking about at the staff level all year long as we've been adopting this budget. And the tax rate is going to be key. The tax rate that is adopted with the final budget is going to be key, especially over the next couple of years, as we see a lot of properties being added to the tax rolls. So with that, I know that was a lot. We're going to work through a presentation here. I'm going to let Krista work through this. Please stop us if you have any questions, comments, and Garrett and I will probably interject along the way. With that, Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions before we get started.
Any questions, anybody? All right,
Krista.
Okay. All right, so we're going to start off with some highlights, basically things that we've been talking about for the last several months. Some things that just wanted to make sure we pointed those out today, and then we're going to end with outstanding items. And then, of course, everything in between, just the changes that we've been making after the last couple of workshops. Sure.
Need a keyboard, it might be,
You know,
I need to get it closer.
You can space.
I'm on that
Him and the keyboard.
desktop.
He'll drive for you.
Just need to be closer.
Oh. Oh, okay. You want to be my driver?
Drive for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. So starting with overall citywide financials, our overall revenues are up 4% from the budget of 2023. Our expenses remain flat comparing to last year's budget.
We're gonna get a copy of this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
General fund revenues are up 7% and expenses for general fund are up 3%. We have no rate increases in utilities this year for the next year's budget. We do have a reduced amount of our water revenues due to the water restrictions, residents cutting back on their water.
And I wanted to note that we do have some of the lowest rates, water rates, electric rates, and sanitation rates in the region, in the entire state of Texas.
Capital expenditure requests, we've made some changes. We're at 12.2 million now, with 3.7 of that being under general fund, 8.5 for enterprise. New personnel requests. We started with 16. We've made some changes. We're down to 12 now, and that includes dropping off 5 and then adding 1 new position for municipal court.
One of its effective start dates, is that October 1st or are any of those delayed?
There are some delayed, and we'll have another slide for that.
Right, we have the 3 EMS positions that will be mid-year. We'll also talk a little bit more about potentially adding some additional staff as part of that mid-year process. Again, just depending on what sales tax is like.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and then property tax. The last meeting, the voter approval rate was set during the workshop, so I've included that additional revenue in the budget. So that is included in the general fund revenues. And that would be at the voter approval rate of 0.181386. That added about $500,000 to our revenue. All right, with that, we go ahead and start out with the projected fund balance. In the next slide, I'm going to get into more of the definition and the way our policy outlines what we should carry in our fund balance and our reserve. One thing I wanted to point out on this slide is for water, the water line item, the 16.3 million in expenditures, that does include projects that are going to be funded with impact fees. So that impact fee bank account is separate, it's restricted. So when you see 16 million there, part of that money is going to be paid for out of a different, will be paid with impact fees that are in a different bank account, but that cash is not included in this beginning balance.
Is that a new line item entry? Because we were showing $11 million deficit before.
That's basically the same number, and this does not show up as revenue in the budget. That is where that deficit number is coming from. We're
Okay.
borrowing from that beginning fund balance to fund projects, equipment, and so forth.
Okay, got it.
Making sure that we don't get to a point where we're funding these recurring costs with any kind of fund balance.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
exactly what I was talking about. When you get a little bit top heavy, you gotta get something up, borrow a little bit from that savings account to pay for that. We don't ever want to be in that position.
Okay.
We have approximately about $5 million in our impact fee bank
Right.
account. So we'll be drawing against that, those revenues from impact fees that have been collected.
And impact
to this
fees
day.
are developer, paid based on.
Right.
Impact fees for new subdivision development, basically, that can be used for extension of utilities to support. Have several of those projects put in.
All right, so I just went ahead and copied in our financial policy reserve requirement. The most important thing to note here is that we must maintain a fund balance of no less than 3 months of regular operating expenses. So we'll have another slide coming up, but I'll show where with the voter approval rate, our revenues and expense wise, we're within about $10,000 a month of covering our expenses. All right, so here's the citywide revenue versus expenses. We were over showing a $12 million deficit. Now we're down to 11.4. Capital expenditure requests are 12.2 million, which basically is the majority of it's all of that deficit that we have there. Recurring capital includes a fire rescue truck, street equipment, electric truck, water backhoe loader, back jet truck, sanitation truck, and then we have the 2 EMS ambulance remounts. So we do have some recurring expenses, but not a lot compared to our overall 12.2 million budget for capital this year.
Will that be showing up as debt? Because of,
Part
there's a
of it-
difference, right?
Yes,
You know,
part of it will be capital. It will be in the 5,000 series. And then if we have any lease purchase, then it will be in the debt. All right, general fund. Just looking at this fund, we have a $3,289,000 deficit. So we have come down on that from where we were. But with adding in the additional voter approval tax revenue, and then also pulling out some of the capital projects and some of the personnel, we've been able to lower our expenses. So they're just up 3% over last year's budget. And then I did want to point out on the capital expenditure request for general fund, 1.2 million of the 3.7 is the shared use bridge street project.
Can you speak to those dollars, Garrett, 1.2 million?
Yeah, so basically the $1.2 million is the overall project cost. I believe the grant funding amount for that project total is $920,000. So basically, the city will be reimbursed for the majority of those costs.
And don't we have 100,000 from the previous developer to put that in?
Yes,
Okay,
that's all part of that as part of the Uther Street Hotel project.
Yeah.
I did have a note here, capital, that's not on the slide, capital budgets in prior years. In 2019 for general fund, we were at 1.4 million, 1.4 million again for 2020, 901,000 for 2021. And in 2023's budget, we went up to a $5.1 million capital budget.
When was the big water project? Was that 2008, 18?
18
18.
were the
Okay.
revenue bond projects.
It's about 18.5 million. That makes the budget look very inflated.
Right.
Okay, so these are the changes that have been made in the capital expenditures for general fund. City Hall lobby remodel has been removed. We had 2 police vehicles, the substation renovation, 1 pneumatic roller in the street department. And then we did add in 300,000 back in the parks budget for tennis and pickleball courts.
And I think this is probably just pickleball courts. We had discussed maybe not doing anything on the tennis side, but keeping 300,000 and keeping something in for pickleball. So again, this is a number that can move up or down. And, you know, I don't think 6 courts is going to make much of an impact, but again, as a placeholder for this item, we included this
It's a little closer, it's like $390,000 for went back and checked,
for 6.
yes.
Okay.
Just excluding the lines and everything, we don't do the lines, but I can cut it back down to closer to 300.
This is just the list that we've been reviewing during the other budget workshops with just the removals taken out. And then tying back to the about 3.7 million for general fund on the capital request. And then the next slide, I think, is just the enterprise. 12.2, 12.3 million overall. New personnel request, we have made some changes. We started out with 16 positions and we're at 12 now. We removed the assistant city secretary, the GIS specialist, the IT specialist, the school resource sergeant, and the EMS training officer. And then we added the municipal court clerk. And that municipal court clerk, I do have budgeted starting December 1st.
Will we review this mid-year?
Yes, sir. Leading up to mid-year as well.
Okay.
You know, as I mentioned, there are a few of these positions we may consider adding mid-year.
Okay.
And this is just showing where the new personnel requests are falling as far as what fund they're hitting. Like, for example, the assistant to the city secretary is split between 4 funds. Total of 939,000 now on those 12 positions. And we do have revenue that helps offset some of these positions. Development services had additional revenue. I believe it was about 75,000. And then municipal court, we did move the code enforcement revenue to municipal court. So I've increased their revenue by about 50,000. And then EMS also had a additional revenues for 2024. All right, so the salary adjustments, we do have the 5% increase built into the budget effective October 1, 3% COLA and 2% merit. The impact to the general fund is 438,000, but when you add in TMRS and tax, it's 571,000. Of that 571, 480 is for first responders.
Let me just ask you, I always like to compare it. You know what the county's doing on their salary raises? Or
I
what
think-
they anticipate?
I think they're looking at a little bit more than we are. We had a discussion with Daniel. I want to say it's 7%, maybe 6 or 7%.
But they're also trying to get more competitive, aren't they?
They're trying to get more competitive.
The sheriff's department. for
Certainly, they
sure.
did address, you know, the sheriff's department salary issue. And following what the city did last year, I think they're trying to get kind of more competitive across the board.
Okay. I would just always like to
Yeah.
compare it to.
And I think they did, you know, something very similar to what we did last year in terms of,
Yeah.
you know, I think it was 8 or 9% maybe.
Okay, and then pay adjustments, we did look at some employees that were not at $20 an hour. There's approximately 16 full-time employees. So we've adjusted their pay rates in the budget, and that affected general fund about 65,000, enterprise 20. This slide we covered in our last budget workshop. At that time, we were at the no new revenue tax rate that was in the budget. And now, like I said, I have increased the revenue based off of the voter approval tax rate. The difference between the voter approval and the no new revenue is approximately $73 per year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this slide is just basically showing how our current rate is the 19.5 cents, the 0.195823. So that is higher than what the voter approval tax rate is. So there is a decrease there in the tax rate. And then the no new revenue rate being at the 16.5 cents versus the voter approval rate of 18 cents. And just what that looks like, that 72.93 increase amounts to $6 a month, 20 cents a day. And then we did have a decrease in our debt, our general fund debt. We paid off the limited tax note was for the animal shelter. So by doing that, it's decreased our interest and sinking debt rate. So that just means more money is going to be able to be put into the general fund versus putting it in Fund 15 for our debt service.
How much debt was retired?
It was about savings of about $317,000 for the year.
Important to note, this will go back up if we do issue debt. We're talking about some of the street projects and facility. City facilities that will go back up. So that addition back into the M&O side will not be permanent.
So this slide, I was trying to show, point out how we're trying to get to a balanced budget with looking at our recurring expenses. So we looked at our personnel, maintenance operations, capital and debt, and annualized that. So that's about $24 million. Adding in the voter approval tax rate, the additional 500,000 in revenue, puts us at a revenue of 23.6 million. And looking at our expenses at 23.7 million, that amounts to about $122,000 for the year.
The no new tax rate, I thought that we were generating 174,000 against that number.
It's that plus the debt.
You want to go back to the slide, previous. Yes.
So yeah, so we had, with paying off that interest and sinking rate, it was 178,000 if nothing else changed with the debt.
Okay, gotcha.
So with the debt falling off, then that money went to the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
So 122,000 annually is what we're short currently with everything in the budget as it stands. So that's about $10,000 a month.
Say that again, sorry, before the 10,000 a month, what are we short?
121,847. That's just general fund revenues less expenses.
And again, trying to edge closer to that true balanced budget on the general side.
For operating expenses. Then obviously we're always going to have capital expenses that will fall, and that will usually come back against our fund balance. All right, so outstanding items from budget workshops. This is the list I put together. I'm sure there's more things, and if there are, just let me know. We can add them on here. Housing allowance. There is nothing currently plugged in the budget currently for a housing allowance. We do not have anything in the budget for a grant writer. We had talked about the EDC budget and if we wanted to include the increases that were in the budget for EDC. Because they are included right
Do you
now.
want us to respond to any of these or just wait?
Sure, you go ahead.
The housing allowance for police, I think I'll talk about that in a minute. So I did have to reapproach that based on councilperson Emily's perspective that it wasn't constitutional, and Mick confirmed that. So I'll talk about that in a minute. The EDC budget, and this is not targeting anyone or anything. I'm simply saying any shared resources between city and county, I wouldn't want to see a pay raise that is out of line with COLA and merit for our city staff. I just don't see that making any sense.
I would agree.
Market plat special event, additional revenues. And then we've talked a lot about hot revenues and how we might be able to use. the
Talked
hot-
about it, but we don't have a solution yet or.
We do
conclusion.
not have we have not come to a conclusion yet.
When are we going to?
I think we were gonna talk about that after the budget. That's on
Right,
market.
and we had talked about discussing that in a lot more detail in October. That cost to recovery is basically what it would be.
Well, my only point is if you're doing it in the budget, if that, and maybe it's not enough to make a difference.
It's probably going to be somewhere in that $100,000 to $150,000 range that we're trying to recover. And, you know, I think we have 3 or 4 different options that we may consider, and I think it's probably going to require a lot more discussion before we can develop a policy and actually add something to the budget. So we had talked about that, and also Food and Wine Fest, discussing that after the adoption of the budget. I think both of those go in.
But we've got items like Food and Wine Fest that would make a big difference if we did put it in there.
Is that loaded in the budget today, the 191K?
For the Food and Wine Fest,
Food-
it is. We did not make any changes on that.
I don't know where the
On the
rest,
revenue
But
and
we've
expense.
talked about possibly cutting that.
that's what I thought we agreed on.
Yeah.
That would take care of our 121,000.
Yep.
Well, actually, it's for general fund, the shortfall.
And then I'm also hearing there's an increase asked for by the director, which I don't think we're agreeing to.
Right.
So why are we putting it in there?
We can pull that out, and I think, you know, if I remember correctly, we were going to pull that out, and then we were going to discuss the event again.
I know, but if we pull it out, then that number we pull out, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And we kind of in general
I
agreement.
think we all,
But are we having the event this year?
this year.
Yeah, this year.
Yes,
this year.
couple weeks, yes,
This year,
It's only a few weeks away.
24
we
now.
had discussed pulling it next year, so we could discuss changing the event.
We've already spent the money
and
at this
starting
point.
back up.
Right.
So can we
Okay.
prorate this and just leave them with enough to, whatever it is, carry over after the event? Like what, if it's like 197,000, could we make it, give them 30,000 this year to wrap things up?
You could also amend the budget mid-year to reprogram those dollars elsewhere.
And then it's the actual.
My thing about getting to it is we want to see some real numbers. We keep talking about, well, maybe we'll take that, maybe we won't. It's not a real number here. And if it's not gonna be there, then, you know, I would agree with, Emily that maybe put 30, but not 191.
I would agree with that.
Krista, can you just clarify, the 121 that we were talking about earlier is for general, is Food and Wine in general fund or enterprise? So it wouldn't
It's
matter,
separate.
correct? Okay. Just making sure.
So what are we gonna do?
I need to have a conversation and find out at what point the costs start coming in to figure out what that prorate might look like. Or head it
Well, I
off sooner
said
than
that
later.
The cost will start the month afterwards in November, right?
The food and wine is in general fund.
Enterprise.
It's
It's
not,
separate.
it's separate as far as my fund balance numbers.
So it would impact tourism up there, correct?
Yeah, the Food and Wine Fest just has its own line item right underneath general fund.
Tourism's hot, I think.
Okay, well then I have a different,
Up there, okay.
There will be a lot of expenses for her, like wine. That won't happen
Okay.
in the
And most of the
FY
ones are-
24.
general government funds.
All the coastal revenue.
So, general fund.
See, it's it's October.
Well, we've always separated it. It falls in the general fund category, but we keep it separated. Just when we're looking at the fund balances. And then also that it's its own separate
So with
department.
regard to the proposed reduction in Food and Wine Fest in this budget cycle, that would not impact the 121 deficit,
No, it would not.
okay?
What about landfill? That wasn't on the list. We talked about there being an increase in tipping fees. Had that survey back. And
We
will that
do,
affect anything on the
that's
general?
one of the items, the potential revised fees that we may present on the 19th. Otherwise, it'll be the first meeting in October. We did address that in the revenues for the sanitation enterprise fund, so those are calculated in.
And I think it's calculated in 75 or 80. So
Yeah, it's kind of a trade-off, because again, we're looking at raising fees, but we're hoping that reduces the tonnage
Yeah.
coming in.
Right, it's not much of an increase and really not an impact on our local citizens.
So, let me just pause right here for a second, Chris. Council, we've not discussed specifically where everybody is on the tax rate. So once, Krista finishes with her presentation, if it's okay with Clinton and so forth, that's where I think I would like to hear what your thoughts are at this point about the no new rate or the voter approval rate or somewhere in between. Because that will make a difference as to where we get the pencil out, right? And I know you've got some comments on that, Randy. So if it's a no new rate, then we need to start looking for bigger issues than a little bit of savings on this and that and the other. And so I'd like that, I don't know where everybody is on that, and I would appreciate everybody knowing where everybody is in, yeah. I said that very poorly, but I think you meant I know what I meant.
Right, and again, we set the rate at the no new, or not the no new rate, voter approval rate. So that is the way we developed this budget.
Understand,
We can talk about cuts,
understand.
for that decision really needs to be made during this meeting.
Yes,
So we can bring to you on the 19th a budget that
Yes.
reflects that tax
and
rate.
that's what I'm getting, because I think, Clinton, my sense is that since we set the rate that we could publicize, that there's been some real serious drilling down by members of council on particular items and on the overall budget, whether or not we want to go start looking for anywhere between 127 to 600 and something. Yeah,
And like I said up front too, I think it probably affects future years more than it affects 2024. What both sides of that ad valorem tax equation looks like. The new properties coming on and the current properties, the valuations going flat, potentially going down. That's really what I'd like to end with, that discussion. Yeah.
well, and that'll be part of the discussion when council members declare themselves where they are with a particular tax rate,
Yes.
where they would like to head.
Right.
All right, go ahead.
Right, just a last few outstanding items. We've looked at different ways of making use of the hotel occupancy tax revenues. We've been reaching out to Mick on a lot of those topics, and we're still looking at what we can do, but just recently we looked to talk about the RV restroom repairs to see if there might be some way that we could use hot revenues for that. But currently it didn't seem like that was gonna
That's a
go.
no.
Yeah.
And then we've also looked at allocating personnel costs. So we're still, I think, looking into that.
Which one?
Personnel.
For tourism.
Mhm.
Formula.
Actually, the historic preservation officer, things like that.
So it's formulas, right?
Yes.
It's like you can use X amount per percent to
Correct.
pay this.
We'd have to justify it.
Yeah.
Potentially.
That all goes toward that 15%.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Chris, I want to make sure I'm clear on this slide. These are things that have yet to be discussed in any thorough fashion or come to any conclusion, and they're not currently reflected in the budget proposal that we're seeing.
Correct.
Okay,
That and just a few FYIs.
okay. So we could close the loop on them today, though.
We could.
Okay. Or somehow.
American Rescue Plan, we talked about this during the city county meeting. LCRA, Reagan Rathke did reach out to LCRA and they have invoiced us. So the city and the county have agreed to move forward with paying everything but 10%. So I do have the 10% budgeted in 2024 now, that we'll look at paying everything in 2023.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, since we've got it budgeted for 23, why are we moving it on to 24? It hadn't been spent. In a sense, it's been put in reserve or something, right?
Well, actually, we didn't know the timing on it at all, so we will need to do a budget amendment for 2023's budget when we pay this. Because it's not in it, we budgeted for the financing, but not for the city's share. The city's share and the expense is not in our budget. Or, I'm sorry, the county share,
So what does that 10% equate to dollar wise?
like $300,000,
As long as, I've said this before, as long as we have leverage to make sure the system works,
right?
the vendor is responding, I don't want to lose that leverage.
No, we agree. I think everybody would agree on that. My point being is if we've got it to 23, why aren't we moving on to 24?
Well, we're only moving the 10% into 24,
Right.
just because we're not in service. And for 2023, we do not have this, the county's revenue or their expense in our budget, so we'll have to put that in.
Okay.
As a,
But we're
as a- as a-
moving the 10% because we don't have the radios.
Well,
We've
I
got
guess
the
what I'm
invoice.
saying, I want to make sure that we're not having to put that in the budget, show that we,
No, we're getting invoiced for everything. And we're holding 10%, even though we don't have the equipment.
And as part of the American Rescue Plan, we reviewed the generators for water, the water department. We have a 10% retainage on those, and I think we're trying to get that 10% paid in 2023. So we won't have to carry that over. The broadband project, I've checked with Eric, and looks like we do have about 200,000 remaining available in 2023. That it's going to be part of a change order of some sort for 2024. So we will have to carry, I will need to enter that 205,000 into the budget. And the last thing I have is just the department head budget review. I mean, I know they're all checking it, but I'd like every department head to review their budgets from top to bottom and see if there's anything that maybe didn't happen that you expected to happen. If we need to budget it in 2024, we need to know that now so we can put that in.
Do you foresee possibly another workshop between now and the 19th?
We can certainly do that.
I'm just curious, because it seems like we've got a number of items that are open,
are in limbo.
plus
Yeah, can't we ask you out then? The public hearing's on the 13th.
yeah.
We could also meet then.
So, so you're waiting to get department head review.
No, we're just doing one more
One more review,
review.
just to make
Just to
sure.
make sure there's nothing hanging out there that can go to fund balance this next year.
Okay.
Right. That's more for the internal side.
But I guess the question that the mayor has is, do we give you our answer so you can work to that?
I don't think that we're going to see anything major at this point. It's just one more look at it. You know, we have everything up on the wall here that is major outstanding.
Chris, is all the ARPA fund designated?
Yes.
Okay.
So that is all I have for today's presentation. So it's open for questions and discussion about the tax rate or whatever you all would like to talk about.
Okay. If it's okay with you, council, I'd like to go around and just get your feelings, your current thoughts about the tax rate. Seems like that's the best place to start. Randy, you want to start? Because you've done quite a bit of work.
Yeah, in my 35 years of experience doesn't translate to city, so I know that they're two different languages, but what I really started looking at this weekend was the deficit. So if you look at actuals of 23 versus where we're gonna end up, we talked about this before lunch. It's about $11 million. You showed that a moment ago. We're gonna be able to retire about 6 of that through utility connection fees, right? And so we're gonna still have a $5 million deficit. So I don't like deficit budgeting. We talked about that as well. The way we recover that 5 million is dipping into some of our $20 million cash reserve that we'll have as we exit this fiscal year. So one of the concerns I had was that we approve all of this, but we're not funding all of it. So therefore you're having to hand select which items, and Clinton did clarify that's not how it works. The question then I have now is that $5 million, we're being conservative on sales tax and ad valorem, correct?
Mhm.
So you feel confident that we'll rebuild that $5 million that we're borrowing from ourselves over 12 to 24 months?
Well, we're technically not even dipping into our reserve.
Okay,
Our policy requires that we have 3 month of operating expenditure. So we haven't gone beyond that. So we're not technically borrowing.
So you have reserves and then you have fund balance. The reserves are 3 months operating.
Yep.
Fund balance is everything additional. So we're borrowing from the fund balance, but not that reserve.
right, but we're gonna replenish that 5 million within what time frame?
We're cutting.
We're
it
not
short.
required to replenish it within the 3 month requirement. It's if we dip into the reserve, the 1.8 million, the $1.8 million, if we would dip into that, we have 1 to 2 years to pay it back.
Okay.
I don't know if this is what you're asking, but, based on what we're looking at on the sales tax side and potentially ad valorem side, I don't know that we're going to be able to recover that fund balance side of the equation.
That's my question.
We're gonna end up about 1.8 million year end, and I don't know that we're going to be able to add to that unless we have cost savings. Employees we don't hire, projects we don't, equipment that we don't buy, we'll add back to that. But we're not gonna add back to that with revenues on the general fund side. And again, we're projecting pretty flat on the sales tax side and, potentially property valuations being flat. A lot of communities around us are projecting down. We're not Austin. Our valuations didn't drop in 2008. So I think flat is a pretty good, conservative estimate. But at the same time, in the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot of properties coming onto the tax rolls. We have the Albert Hotel. We have Ken Carr's apartments. We have all of the apartments on Friendship Lane and 16 North coming on. Some other potential developments that are being discussed right now. I did a calculation somewhere in the, $100 to $150 million range in new valuations, just for those particular properties. So when you consider 2 cents on all that's being added, that's a significant bump on just the new property side. If valuations are flat, that's all we have.
Is anybody interested in going lower than the no new revenue rate?
I mean,
No.
Okay.
Hold on, I'm sorry, you said no new revenue.
voter approval rate.
Yes, is anybody interested in going any lower than the no new revenue rate? In other words, is that the floor for everybody?
Oh, no.
Sure.
That's,
I'm not saying you agree to it. I'm saying you would never go any lower.
that's correct.
Okay, so we're looking at somewhere between that and the voter approval. Is anybody interested in having a tax rate election this year?
No,
Okay,
Yes, sure.
so our window is no new revenue to voter approval, which she has shown. I just want to make sure we're all there.
Yeah.
Yep.
So could I get their thoughts about, I'm sorry, Randy, you haven't finished.
No, I'm giving you a very long answer and I apologize
That's
for
okay.
that.
when you get old, you do.
I'm not old yet. My reservations with the no new rate, and I was leaning very strongly there, and I still have a portion of me thinking that direction, is, with the statewide November election, property tax impact, with what Governor Abbott signed, I don't know how that impacts us. So it's an unknown for me. I don't know. Maybe, Emily, maybe you have some
Just
information.
affects your school tax.
Okay, so it doesn't impact us whatsoever. Scott Fair did say, hey, when Travis County is down, we're up. So nobody has a crystal ball, but it feels like that property valuation will stay steady and so forth. If we can get to changing our philosophy and away from a deficit budget approach of building the budget and how we approach this, then I would lean towards the voter approval rate.
Tony?
Well, part of my deal is, and I know the city's been around since 1845. part of my deal is we're betting on the come constantly. And what really worries me about that, we never thought about COVID. And I mean, that sunk a lot of people. And so what I'm concerned about is that we're constantly betting on the come and trying to say we need to get closer to what if. Of course, I'm a banker and conservative. I would never make a loan with people to say, this is what I would always look on, where you reserves, what if can you protect? So it's real important that we have those reserves out there. Now, I guess reserve, we used to buy Turner Hall, is that right?
Fund balance.
The fund balance,
Right.
okay. And so I can understand those things are to come along.
Right.
But I'm certainly not in favor of trying to raise any more taxes than we have to. I still think the main thing is security, police, EMS, water system, utilities. We've got to have those things. The other things are kind of like, okay, if, maybe. So I'm still trying to say we need to keep it down as low as we can.
So you're not fixed on the no new revenue rate, but you'd like to head toward that?
Yeah.
Okay.
You go. We budget annually, and gets to your point, we're just, so much of it is future focused. As I look at how low our tax rate is, I get it that there's also the appraisals, fully aware. The legislature has so handcuffed cities that we cannot increase the tax rate if we ever needed to. So you've got a town like Marble Falls, their tax rate is 90 cents. Their average home value is about 458,000. Here, it's 19 cents with about 550 average home value. So if something were to come along down the road and we're stuck at a low, the lower, it's going to be a fight uphill no matter what. So with new population comes new challenges, and I don't want us to be so conservative that we are then stuck with having to go before the voters for a tax rate increase later. So my position in looking at, I campaigned on strong, I can remember I campaigned on sustainably thriving economy, strong infrastructure, and safe community. And I see that reflected in this budget. And so because of that, I would support the voter approved rate.
Mr. Watson,
I'm voter approved rate for all the reasons Emily just said. I think if we go too low, especially with what the state has done to us, I don't foresee us unless we have an election to increase the rate. And I don't think anybody would vote for an increase in taxes. But we're a vibrant community and we need to maintain our infrastructure. We need to maintain the services that we provide. The people of Fredericksburg have come to expect those services. And if we dip below that, I think they'll be dissatisfied. And that's part of what makes Fredericksburg. And the rate is lower than the previous rate, last year's rate. And for me personally, I don't think I'm conservative as well. I just don't think we need to go too low, because we'll never get it back. And I think we've got some things coming up in the next few years that we need to have the money to provide parks, more capital expenditure, street stuff. I know that's not general fund, but we need to have the money to operate the city properly. And by how people expect us to do it, how it's been done.
well, let's say that we all agreed on let's say that we had an approval amongst the council for the voter approval rate. Does the deficit budgeting concern you to much degree? Or do you feel that that's well covered in the procedures that our finance staff and city manager deals with? Now we're down to a 5 million if we did a voter approval, is that right, Ray?
5 million,
Because of that.
which we have apparently covered. But my question is, okay, we're dipping into the piggy bank. Can we recover that over a period of time? And if so, how much? And what's the mechanism? Because I don't want to go in the whole $5 million and without being able to recover.
We develop a budget on the general fund side where revenues cover expenses. If we get to that point, we're able to do every project, we're able to hire every person. I don't think we can get there with, just based on what we're looking at, anything much lower than the voter approval rate right now. And if we're doing that, we're not adding anything back to that fund balance. We're not adding anything back to that cushion. I think another important piece of the equation here is our continued pursuit of additional revenue sources for fire EMS and PD that don't impact our ratepayers. That's something that I'd like to keep top of the list as we're moving forward. Our departments are bigger than they have to do to support our tourist volume, period.
Yep.
I want to try to figure out a way to recover some of that expense, but we essentially would not be adding anything back to that fund balance.
Okay. So in talking to Mick this afternoon, after we broke, or this morning, I'm still pursuing the tourism tax approach. And I said, I want to find a mechanism to make this happen. He said, well, you can establish a tourism district. And I said, well, how does that work? And he said, basically, you have to get all of the hoteliers to agree to this, that they could add up to, I think he said 1.5 percentage points, I think was what he indicated, that they would have to agree to it. And that would set the law of the land that any future hotels move in here, they have to comply with it, and STRs would as well. So I'd like to pursue that to find out if we could generate another 1.5 worth of taxes on tourism to help offset the concerns I have on the $5 million deficit. So I would ask for support in pursuing that and trying to make that a reality.
Emily, the deficit, just the concept of deficit, how do you feel about it?
I think government's in an interesting place because you're expected to provide services regardless of what may. And so there could be wildfires, there could be floods, there could be all kinds of things. And if we don't have more fluid flexibility between just like a equals year to year, I don't think that it doesn't fly. I would love for it to, but we can't just say, well, sorry, there's a fire, so we're not going to pick up trash for the next 2 weeks. Can't. So you're going to have some reserves to borrow from, and it's not going to be equal flat every year. It'd be great if you could, because you could sell that.
So given that we have to do this every year on a deadline, and what we're faced with at this moment is a budget that keeps services up and provides quality service to our community with even some anticipations for things that we hope and don't know, is deficit funding appear to be necessary to a degree. It is 5 million or whatever. Is that something that I know you wouldn't do that in your business and you wouldn't loan to a business, but with regard to how we have to fund with revenue streams and so forth?
Well, that's where I think I'm learning, is because I didn't have the big capital expenditures when I was an executive. I just didn't have that stuff. I didn't have streets needing repairs every 10 years or floods or fires, to Emily's point. So that's where I need to better understand how important that cash reserve is.
Got the eclipse coming up this next year. It's gonna cost this community some money.
This,
Hopefully make some too.
yeah,
Well, hopefully.
this is my 9th budget. We budgeted basically the same way all those years. We keep a watch on it every month. We look at it midterm. And for things that we are on the edge of whether we fund it or not. We've been very conservative and push them off as far as we can and even roll them into the next year. I think the staff here has done an outstanding job of protecting our funds, protecting our money. And just because October 1 hits, we don't fund everything. There are certain things that we need to fund, but we don't just fund everything. So we take a look at it, and if we don't have the money, a lot of times we don't spend it, and it goes into the next year. So I am not uncomfortable at all.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the capital list on the general fund side?
These,
No,
That's
The
the
next one.
one just before that. Yeah. Next one.
display,
By the way, Brian, you brought in two
Right.
new
One back.
police officers this morning. Are you still short?
Yes. So just to give you an idea, this is everything on the general fund side that's being added to the budget this year. This is the capital side of the equation, you know, that we're sacrificing if we don't continue to build that general fund side of the budget. It's police vehicles. You've heard the chief say how many miles they put on vehicles and being able to replace those. You know, it's difficult to do our job. Chris, how old is the piece of equipment that we're replacing in the street department, pneumatic roller?
20 years.
Okay, chief, your rescue truck currently, how old is it? 24 years old. So those are the types of things that, you know, we're replacing. We're making doing a lot of renovations to the parks, adding equipment so that we can maintain parks. We do have some IT costs that result in increased efficiencies and so forth, but there's nothing on this list right here, you know, that is really not an essential need at this point.
So up to the use, shared use bridge. If we put in the grants and the
Right.
escrow, that really is a $200,000
That's right.
cost. And it's showing $1.2 million.
and that's, a lot of that was addressed in previous budgets.
Right.
So most of that is just carryover.
Okay.
But in terms of how it's gonna impact cash, is that what you're saying? Yeah,
Right.
it's not 1.2, it's more like under 200,000.
Correct.
Okay. Clinton, I think all of us are embraced by the needs and see that, that's our job. There are people who could pick and choose, you know, well, why are we doing that? But that would put us here the rest of the afternoon. Conceptually, I just wanted to know where the council was, if they're ready to just make the decision to go with a particular tax rate, then that puts the onus on the staff to do the rest of what you need to do, correct? I mean, we're not gonna overspend $5 million. And it was hard for me to get my head around too, Randy, when I was doing these. There is a point to be made in the community that what we always do, but a revenue and expense out budget. But
In your experience here, have we had a lower fund balance than what's shown on this budget?
In terms of general fund or overall? General fund, we're probably getting close to where we were, and I might turn to Krista back in maybe the 2014-15 timeframe. May have been down. You know, we had some really good years through COVID, you know, with property valuation increases and so forth, really trying to, but we can get you that information. Bobby, I think we were a bit lower, you know, about a decade ago, and we've built that up over time. Can you answer that, Krista? I can take a look.
No, I don't, I can look that up. I'm just looking at our actuals back to 2015. And like you were saying, Bobby, earlier, we always tend to budget at a deficit because we added a lot of projects. But we actually haven't ever ended at a deficit, from back to 2015. So,
That's what's throwing me off is we're showing it,
right.
but when we look at actuals the year prior, now we're revenue
Right.
neutral.
And a lot of that is just timing of projects and timing of personnel. You know, we have 12.2 million in projects. The chances of all of those getting in 2024, you know, I'm not sure what the chances are based off of how we've been looking the last several years.
Some of those projects are multi-year projects, or depending on when we start them, might carry half of, you know, that project into the next year. So that's all part of that equation too.
So it is different.
I knew writing it last night, it was different. I said, I'm here to learn, and I didn't mean to keep you awake till 3 a.m. I apologize.
Both of us, yeah. You know, and some city managers have the philosophy that if we include this project in a budget, we need to finish it by the end of the fiscal year. You know, as an engineer that's done a lot of projects, a lot of times that's just not possible. We're only funding a portion of the project and trying to guess how much of the project will actually be done. Fund that this next year and then pick up the balance the next year. It just really complicates things. So although it does make the budget look a little bit out of balance at times, I like to try to explain it in a way where you can understand the carryovers and the need to do that.
So, you know, I think that the conversation here has been very healthy and helpful to me. And I have complete trust in staff in putting this together. So I would say voter approval rate is where I will be.
We can still help those things with how we feel about those things. If we decided on a tax rate, then we still want to deal with that.
Yes,
I think. At least I see 2 or 3 that I would like to. I know Tony did as well. So I think what I'm hearing is the voter approval rate would win the vote right now. Tony, could we twist your arm?
No,
I appreciate, well, you're.
I can agree. I've heard now some points that I can understand.
And again, you know, we're really looking out into the future and the opportunity that we have into the next year and then 2025 and 2026 and some of the potential bond projects that are lining up. And we have some good projects we've been talking about for a long time. If we're too far behind, there's no way we can afford to do those projects. We can't afford to pay off the debt. That's my main concern, you know, as we're talking about some of these much needed roadway extension projects and some city facilities that, you know, we may be able to pursue in the coming years. I think that puts us in a really good, solid position.
Okay, well, let's just, then we make an assumption about the tax rate. By the way, does the agenda allow for us to, I don't see deliberation anywhere. Is it okay? Is it stated legally that we can vote?
We're not voting on anything today, but with
We're just giving you
council,
a sense of direction.
with council direction, we will finalize the budget, you know, based on what we've heard.
What I'm hearing is that people are comfortable with the voter approval rate.
And on these items up here, some of them I think would be good. But I don't want to rush into making decisions on them.
Okay, not asking you to rush. So what I'd like to do is just see if there's any will today to give direction toward it.
Oh, okay.
I fully agree with Randy about the EDC budget. We have a board that is spending city money without any supervision. They're deciding, here's what we want to spend on the city side. And I think we ought to have more of a break on that. It could be just a discussion with board members from here on out. And also, as I've mentioned to each of you, I think I would like to see us develop sooner than later a, um, a work list, a work plan, what is it we want EDC to do for us? And then to tighten up those things plus the accountability and the reporting to the council. And I think that's good business, and I know you agree. Grant Ryder, where did that come from? Whose idea was that?
That was my idea. I thought it'd be nice to have a little pot of money that different departments could access to pay for a grant writer that would end up paying for themselves. I don't have specifics though beyond that, so
Be okay if we postpone it?
feel free.
Okay, housing allowance on the police, fire and EMS. What do we need to look at that?
So, again, I was coming at it from a stipend perspective and, you know, through multiple conversations, we can't do that. So I can't discriminate against somebody moving from Kendall County to Gillespie into the city. So, I had to take a broader perspective. So what my suggestion is that we hold 150K, I think would be in the general fund at the city level. So we hold that. And if an employee wanted to move, we could allocate a $5,000 relocation package that they could use unrestricted. And that would include utilities, electric, water, police, fire, EMS, city staff, anybody who wanted to move into the county or city. Or quite frankly, if they want to move from the city out to the county or outside, I can't restrict where they're moving. That would fund up to 30 people being relocated. There would be a clawback clause like we would with the police. And it would be a pilot program for 1 year, and then we'd evaluate if it was effective or not for next year.
So that's 150.
150K held in reserve at the city level.
So could we put that in your consideration?
But to be clear, that's not getting people to, we couldn't say, you have to move to Gillespie County, you have to move to Fredericksburg. So if they say, I'd rather move to Bear County, but I need money,
That's true.
here's your 5,000.
That's the downfall.
It's
I can't say where. to
signing
move.
bonus, I guess.
I can't say where to move. That's the.
So it addresses the shortage, but not necessarily living here. Or it might address the shortage.
Potentially, chief.
This, you're talking about the step two.
Step two, that's correct.
Top
So
step
the stipend's off the table. Step one, the police retention bonus still is in play unless someone shoots me down. So that's still in play, the 10K for a 3-year agreement. This is step two, which is all city employee based.
Step one in the budget now.
Step one is coming from cost savings from fiscal year 23, so we still have that in our funds.
That's in the general fund. All right, that's the first step.
It's not in the actual budget. It's not in the expenses, but it would come out of the fund balance.
Okay, does that impact our 24 modeling here?
I mean, it would impact what the fund balance reserves look like right now. We would take that 150 off of that. Because it's not in the
But
budget.
step one is 300K. That's the police.
And that was not in the budget either.
That's not in,
No, we were looking at earmarking that out of the fund balance, but it's not in the budget yet.
so we'd have an additional impact of 450K
One-
between the two.
Well, between the two, 450.
Right, and that fund balance currently is at roughly 1.8 million.
Mhm. 1.8,
With everything that's plugged into the budget
yes.
currently.
Okay,
So that's an example of those savings in ED rolling into that general fund balance,
I thought we had earmarked it for this year though.
right? And we haven't included it in the budget. We're still discussing it. If that's something the council wants, put the 300 or 450 K in there, we could certainly do that. We have it available in the fund balance.
Is it
I think
acceptable
I
to
just
ask?
leave it the fund balance.
Well, the step one would be a payout effective October 1st. Right, so
Of what to what? I'm sorry, I don't remember. What is your step one?
it's the police retention, so salary savings, we had a salary savings of 300K. So across 29 officers, 10K retention for a 3-year commitment to continued service.
10K for 3 years, but we're only able to approve 1 year at a time. So is that the pilot
No,
program
Yeah,
or?
Shelley, do you have that presentation by any chance?
Eric, it's.
Brian's got it.
Well, it's loaded up, Eric, if you. It's, yeah,
That page.
Yeah, I wrote
You're
it,
good.
I got it memorized. But can we show it? Is it possible to show it for a second, who's ever driving?
Get the team.
Because I think we're getting the two confused.
No, I think that's this one,
That's this one.
this one.
Can you get into teams and see?
That's this one.
Yes. Do either possibly.
Shelley, did you load that up by chance?
Yes.
It is there, okay. Well, let me just talk through it then.
It's gonna take it, guys.
Okay, well, I'll just talk through it, see if we can just get there. So the step one was about police retention. So we were losing 14 police officers that had been picked off.
3 patrol officer positions open. We are making progress. That earlier this year, we were 5, 6 short.
Right.
We're 3 short now, and that salary savings throughout the year will carry over.
So if somebody was hired that came out of, academy that we paid for, they're on, contract right now to stay 2 years,
They're on a contract to stay 3 years.
3 years.
But the only obligation to pay back is the actual cost of the academy itself, which
Okay.
is $3,800.
So if any one of those officers that are on that existing contract, would the 3 years be added to the end of that contract? So we tie them up for 5 years, say?
That's a good question. I would need to run it by Meg to see if it's 3 years running current or 6 years.
Would you be able, if it doesn't extend, would there be any need to offer that? I guess you'd have to offer it to all employees, wouldn't you?
Correct. That's our thought, is to offer to all current employees and any new employees coming on board. So if this is offered to all current employees and I have 3 or 4 vacancies come October 1, this will go out in our recruiting tool saying, hey, the next 4 people we hire are eligible for this
Okay,
allotment of money.
I guess my point is if somebody has a 2 years left on their current contract, but it has to, we just get a 1-year extension if it wasn't added on to the end of that contract.
We can
So,
look at that.
okay,
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mick would work up a clawback agreement, so we'd have to figure out that, does that dovetail, or I'm assuming it would.
Well, I'm for trying it,
So you're okay.
retention.
Bobby, would you accept
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
All right. Emily, Tony? We're talking step one now.
Yeah.
Step two, I think step two is a little more challenging, I'll be honest, trying to sell it. But step one,
There was money that was budgeted for salaries last year that was not utilized, correct?
Right.
I mean,
Okay, Emily?
number.
yeah.
step two, the fact that we're holding it at the city level, if nobody takes it, it's just general money that stays there and gets recycled into something different. But it'd be a pilot program. Maybe that 150K for 30 drops to 50K for 10. I don't know. Just making the effort to see if we can facilitate.
We could probably divide that side 50/50, general fund, across funds. You mentioned water department, electric department.
So it'd be covered by everybody.
Right.
So,
What's that?
I think we'll have to cross that.
Step
Randy.
okay, you're okay with that? So 5K unrestricted, pilot 1 year, see if it works.
Yeah, why not?
For everyone or just PDs?
It's everyone.
You gotta go for everyone.
That's the restriction, and we can't control where they go to.
Step 2?
Step 2 is water, utilities, city staff. Anybody have cities, but have a budget limit of X dollars, whatever that is, and we can accomplish up to 30 or 20 or 10, whatever we want to decide.
Who's gonna decide? 30, 20, 10.
We can decide right here, I think.
Because we're aiming at police retention, but we can't specify.
Correct.
So,
And fire and EMS,
I see. And fire, yeah, emergency, well, emergency.
but we can't discriminate, so it has to be.
Is that the pause?
Gives me pause, because I just think, I don't know if this is a role of city government. I wonder if a nonprofit could have tighter, I guess, requirements for, living where and where we wouldn't be able to, but someone else might.
Mm.
And I'm definitely a fan of, retention across the board and taking care of all staff. And so if I do have pause at all in the police retention, it's like, well, do we need to be doing that for everyone? And do we need to get a plan to do that for everyone, in the coming years?
And we don't necessarily have a retention problem anywhere else. Is that correct?
I'd say the Parks Department, but we're trying to address that, bringing the salary up, minimum salary up to 20. Public Works, Chris, I don't think we really have a problem in Public Works on the retention side.
I don't want to create this us versus them and, situation among city staff.
Well, I think that's why we're doing kind of a vanilla approach that encompasses all city staff.
Yeah, that's just devils in the details. I mean, who qualifies, and I feel like moving, or, I really, like, what is the need? That's all of those. And I don't really have the bandwidth to write it all up.
Yeah, we
Well,
Make our
can't solve the director problem that we want, right? It is. I mean.
It feels a little more challenging to me, to be
Yeah.
honest, than the stipend approach.
I'd be comfortable with step one right now.
I'm sorry.
I'd be comfortable with step
So
one.
step one, step twos.
Yeah,
I'd
I
say
agree,
let's,
but step two,
let's
I
look
think
at
we
it
need to
more.
analyze a little bit more.
So how about if I go back with Mick and sit down and flesh out what step two looks like a little bit better? But could we hold it there in the general or wherever you put it and elect to remove it?
So we could divide that up 50-50 between general fund and our enterprise funds and go ahead and add that to the budget. So the 375K in the general fund and 75,000 enterprise funds, you just spread that out. We had talked about refining the policy for the police fire EMS retention by October 1st. We can continue to work on the other policy.
That's fine.
Throughout the year
That's fine.
and make an adjustment if we need to mid-year.
And if we can't, if it's not viable at some point, we just put it to bed and
Right,
move on.
right.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question on something that was deleted a few slides back, but it's not on this list, but it's the police substation was removed for 75,000.
I put $75,000 in the budget for the station remodel, and what that remodel would consist of is a lobby reconfiguration.
Right.
To where we could secure the lobby and open it to the public, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, or whenever we can staff it to have, more foot traffic in and out of our substation on Market Plaza, not only for the citizens or for calls for reporting lost objects, more contact with the community, the visitors. So, that's part of a large vision that I have for the police department. But I feel at this point is something that we can talk about in a few years.
Which we had talked about, I don't know if it was part of this, but making some revisions to that facility, more IT, better kitchen, more places to sit. Has that been done, or is that in the budget?
That has not been done.
Okay,
I went in front of the
Market Square redevelopment.
Market Square,
Market Square redevelopment, and they felt that the remodel, my proposed vision or remodel of the fest room for that facility, wasn't in line with what Market Plaza redevelopment's vision of Market Plaza as a whole is. So
they didn't think it was the best use of the land. So they kind of said, we don't like that plan.
So we just kind of backed off that and said, okay, let's just focus on the current space we have, which is the lobby area, and then getting that open to the public.
Can we move the substation?
It's a pretty
Sure.
good location.
We could,
Apparently, we don't have the facility we need. And
You
we
move
can't,
down to Turner Club. But it's not on Main Street.
I would hate to lose our location, visibility, central to Main Street for our downtown unit, and then the vision of having that open, to the public, on a daily basis, so that that becomes known as a location to where any police services that you need are provided there. Just right off the top of my head, if City Hall relocates, I don't think the fire station is relocating. So at some point, if we had an officer to, maybe in this facility,
No.
keep it open and central to the public.
I understand.
Again, that just popped. in my head.
We had the initial substation over off of, was it Crockett? At the corner of Blair and Austin. I was the bike sergeant back then, and we had 0 traffic in there.
Yeah.
So it was off the beaten path, nobody even really existed. It's just a place that house bike patrol.
Okay. Even if it's what we have, do we have the right equipment in that facility right now?
Like every other city department, lack of space.
I'm disappointed the Marketplace Redevelopment Committee made that decision. So. Thank you.
Okay, and back to the other slide, if you don't mind. With regard to Marketplace special event additional revenues, where were we on that one? Were we going to look at new numbers for everyone, just the big five, or what would we say?
we had talked about, I think, 4 different options potentially, and 3 different options. And Mayor, this is something that we can either add to the budget and pursue, or we can continue to discuss for a future budget year. Again, the-
Council, what do you think? Is this urgent to you? What would be the net gain? If I can, a few dozen thousand?
Well, our current fees are about $20,000. If we were to remove the week-long rentals, double the current rates, we would be at about $48,000, which would be pretty close to cost recovery back from the 2019. If we were gonna go up to try to recover $175,000, talking about major increases.
It was 175, that's our cost.
No, that was just a number that I've been asked to try to see what it would take to get to that number,
Oh.
75.
Okay.
So I don't know what our actual costs are right now because we haven't done a survey of all the staff since 2019. So it would take probably a year and all the
Okay.
city staff would need to keep track of their hours and time.
Okay,
And I think it's gonna be more than $48,000, but I don't have the numbers to justify that.
so council, you want to give some direction there? Do you feel like that's a matter for them to drill down on some numbers? It sounds like it would be not huge, and it might be in steps. I don't know how far behind we are, but what's your feeling about that? Or you just want to leave it alone until next year? Or
It needs to be addressed, and maybe not on the granular level, but if we could even just a ballpark idea of it costs street, this much time to, block off or whatever it is. I'd like to revisit that,
So keep at it.
not by the 19th,
I would
but
agree. And back to the tiered approach, I don't want to impact the smaller venues that are just barely treading water, but the larger venues then.
And that's kind of what the second one was. That's a tiered approach. So Oktoberfest is paying $2,400 right now. They would be paying $9,100. It'd be about a 279% increase.
Still cheap.
Some of the smaller events like Palms and the Plats are paying $375. They go up, just be doubled to $750. So still be a significant increase percentage wise, but actual dollars, it's not that much.
Yeah.
Considering what they're getting when other facilities here in town are going for.
I think that's the right approach.
And can I just add, on that report, a lot of you have seen that we did back in 2019, that did include the 3 parades and Food and Wine Fest. So when we back those out, those are the majority of the costs. So when I back that out, we really only need to cover about $35,000 as far as market plots fees. So that what she just talked about, doubling the fee for everyone, which is 100% increase, and then removing that week-long rate. And then the other major change was any fun run, race, or anything like that. When thousands of people come to Market Square and they're about to start a race, they all have to use the restroom prior to. There are many weekends, myself and park staff are in there restocking toilet paper. So just doing a flat fee for commercial runs, which we usually have 2 of those a year. And then we have the wildflower run. So I'd still like to give them the nonprofit discount because they are here locally. So just looking at that, that would be the easiest way across the board, is just to double those fees, remove the week-long rental, and still we would recover about $48,000 when we really only need to cover about $35K for all the events that happen on Market Square. Or again, if you go back and do that survey, to Emily's point about the street closures, one of the things that I did the last 2 years is when Oktoberfest would put in a street closure for 5 o'clock after the streets department was already off work at 4. We changed that. We moved that time frame up to 7 a.m. on that day, to where we are not paying overtime, and they're doing that while they're on the clock. And we've repeatedly done that with a lot of our events, so that the city is not paying that overtime rate for all those employees to be out there. So we have done things behind the scenes to try to cut those costs. So those costs are originally in that report from years ago, but we've slowly backed those out.
Well, you're talking about some specifics that we wouldn't know, Jennifer, since you do this all the time. I think the concept that the council supports is that we want to move toward not paying so much from the city's perspective. And it sounds like, to be good neighbors with our people who help the city, that maybe taking it in steps would be better than to say, here's $9,000 you got to pay for Oktoberfest this year. That wouldn't be good, because we haven't laid any groundwork. But to put the word out that we are taking a look at this, and it is impacting our taxpayers, and we know y'all do pretty well on these things, whatever. But I am wholly dependent on your expertise and your work. So have you reflected these things in this budget?
No, we haven't done anything in the budget. We'll have to go and actually get the ordinance updated, as well as the fee schedule that's in the city's municipal code, in order to do that.
So do you think it's available this budget cycle, or?
I think we definitely want to get all the events involved, because they're gonna push back and say they didn't budget for this funds.
Okay, so
I know the last time we gave them a year's notice before.
Would you recommend that we postpone this to any sort of increase for this
I
budget cycle?
agree with Emily, but some, we need to go up there, but
Okay, so we need to do something.
yes.
So would you make that known to finance team and Mr. Bailey? Because I think council, right? We want.
Can we say like
No,
as of January 1st, or something
Yeah.
like that? Just give us the time.
And then we'll give them all the events in advance notice so they can plan for next year.
Giving them notice is key
Yes.
to me, and bumping whatever we can, and then the notice includes, and we're not done. Okay. So y'all help us with that, because we're on board with what you want to do, I think.
Okay.
Anything else about that? Those other 3 things on the list, council, the hot thing, the ARPA thing, and the department head, those are all sort of in-house stuff, right?
Where are we on CVB, Brady? Have we,
Yeah, the
We got your-
CBB initiative.
well, no, just their budget. Don't
Oh.
we have to approve
Oh,
something for y'all? Are we doing
Yeah,
it?
it's part of the whole presentation. We went in flat.
Okay,
The rest going to we submitted flat.
okay. Any chance we could use hot for any flexibility? I'm glad y'all are looking at. I mean, do we need a tourist center at the RV restroom so we can move that over? Just
Talk about that a little bit here.
Yeah, what Mick said this morning was that the recent changes relate to counties and not municipalities.
Okay.
So where we are looking at is personnel costs. Again, the historic preservation officer, maybe even Anna's position, since she still would deal with historic preservation, possibly utilizing funds. I think there's potential for around 75,000 in savings there to the general fund. So that is not built into the current budget. We're trying to confirm with Mick that that's doable.
to start.
Yeah.
I'm looking through the general fund, trying to find something to check off in some way. 'Cause, okay, now we're looking at, instead of 120, it's now 475. Because of the step one and the split between general and enterprise on step two. That's a chunk to. And I mean. People are very important, and I think that counts as infrastructure. I'm just curious if any of the positions that can be, leveraged to, I'm thinking of the building inspector, or I'm sorry, what is the title? Building plans inspector? Is that all, can that come out of fees in any
Yep.
way?
Also.
All of it?
provide
Okay.
increase
Okay.
in development services.
Great.
Want to go back to that list? Just take a look at it right quick.
I would love to know of the new ones, which are fees and which are
Sure.
general fund, if I could.
That's it.
I think it's still going back. The other way.
Once we remove some of
There's-
those, no.
And there's another one.
Yeah. There you go.
There.
So the first position doesn't have a large impact, but there's potential to promote someone into this position and not backfill position, so potential savings. On the PD position, that's straight general fund, no new revenue. Development services supported 175,000, and 75,000 of that total in the increases. So almost 1%. General fund, municipal court, Shelley.
We put 50,000 in for code enforcement. That will help.
We've added 50,000 to the budget for code enforcement. Revenue. Vegetation management is enterprise fund. Fire is general fund. Three new positions right there. Revenue.
There's additional revenue in EMS, but we're not recognizing any revenue in general fund for fire.
Is that transfers? You said there's additional revenue there?
For EMS. Yes, just there because of the calls and activity pickup.
I know these were addressed in our county meeting, but our county, are they good with our shared employee
Yeah.
expenses?
Mhm.
I think so.
And the EMS, three positions, that's start date of
April 1st.
April 1st,
Mhm.
and that's 50% of the number.
Thank you.
Anything else?
So now staff's gonna have to go find 475,000.
You have the direction you need from us at this point.
I wonder if
Yes,
we
sir.
don't pull step two out until mid-year. I'm just trying to figure out how to shape out some of the things I just added, but I mean, Chief, what do you think?
I would agree with that.
Okay.
I think there's quite a bit more work and some
Okay,
conversations to have about step two.
okay.
But I would agree to hold that.
So mid-year, we can look at sales tax and reintroduce it, or quite frankly not. Mayor, what are your thoughts?
And that's the,
Step two, the 5K relocation package.
right, and that's the 300 or the 150 or which is
It's
that?
the 150.
Okay, holding on.
Pausing until mid-year just to do a reevaluation.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, it's dollars now. It's not that it's not a good idea.
Yeah, to me, it's dollars as well. I'd rather preserve step one.
And we may find a little bit,
Okay, if we can find something,
a dollar here, a dollar there.
It all adds up.
I'm sorry for asking this, Andrea, but the pickleball is coming out of general, right? Because it's a capital expense.
Yes.
Are we doing what we need to make sure that soccer fields are as they should be? Because to me, that soccer is a priority over pickleball. I know there's a demand for it, but I'm
Still
also
waiting.
seeing a lot. I see those courts empty a lot. Maybe it's not ideal weather, but if you love the game, go play, right?
There's no money in the budget right now for anything.
So by September 15th, we should have an answer on a donation to soccer.
And did you speak up?
So by September 15th or on September 15th, after September 15th. Okay, we'll have an idea, should know if there's going to be a donation to
Okay.
the soccer
Or
side.
specific over soccer?
Right.
And what did you say? There's no money, what?
Right now, we don't have funds in the general fund for soccer improvements next year.
Or soccer, okay.
But we could have an answer short.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we haven't heard from our friends across the street either.
No, sir.
Did we have a discussion about 300 grand on pocket and tennis and pickle?
We talked about taking it all out and then there was discussion last time to put some back in. And that's kind of, I'm dangling that as, I don't know if that's a necessity for our general fund. I'd rather prioritize some other things.
I'm guilty of throwing it back in there, but if it has to be looked at, then I support that.
You support what?
I would say if we have to take a hard look at that and removing that, then
Of all the things we've looked at, I don't think either one, but of all the things we've looked at that could be considered savings,
I don't,
300 grand,
I don't disagree.
that's huge for, I know the pickleball people are very adamant. Good.
However, we have no private clubs in this town that could very easily be built if someone really wanted to play a lot of pickleball and
I
tennis.
just think with what the discussion we're talking about, the way we're trying to look at dollars and cents here and say, well, $300,000, that's goes without saying. I don't think it should.
Last conversation I had with pickleball people was, I'm all for it, but show me what kind of fundraising effort you provide.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Come up with, and I haven't seen anything, so
Okay, so let's maybe consider that,
I'd soon take it out.
reconsider that. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would agree. I would agree with that.
Tony? Tony, do you agree?
No, I agree.
Taking a look, another hard look at that.
That covers the
There's my step one.
step one.
Well,
That's true.
you have both, Randy.
Thank you. May have another.
What else do we need to do today?
I think the council is given us sufficient direction on the items that we brought to you, so we will work on those, adjust the budget, and come up with a final proposed budget for your consideration on the 19th. We do have a public hearing on the budget on the 13th. If we do need to discuss anything further, we can use that opportunity to do so.
Can I ask a clarification? Under capital repair, RV restroom repairs, is that different than the replacement?
Well, we
It's the same.
determined that's not eligible.
It's not eligible.
That'll be general fund.
Okay, that will, but we're still gonna do that.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was my question.
Anything further? Staff, any comments? Thank you for your help. Thank you for being here. We are adjourned. Thank you, Krista. I know you.